Hello. I have read The Last Temptation of Christ by Nikos Kazantzakis. It was originally published in 1955 in Greek, and then later, 5 years later, in English in 1960. My version is the 88 version, published in junction, I believe, with the movie of the same name, directed by Martin Scorsese and starring Willem Dafoe. The movie was incredibly controversial when it came out, and as was this book. Interestingly enough, I hear way more about the movie than I do about this book, even though I haven't seen the movie. I think this would be far more heretical than any movie. Um, I do know that the movie had like fire bombings and things of that nature, which I do not approve of. Um, I think it's just an artist's telling, but from what I've gathered from this book is that Kazantzakis, while he grew up in the Greek Orthodox faith, is clearly he's ripping clearly from heretical texts and Gnostic beliefs. I mean, he literally pulls from the Gospel of Thomas the story of Jesus creating life from clay, the clay bird, and also he Kazantzakis makes Mary Magdalene and Jesus related. They're cousins, and they are madly in love, and God punishes Jesus before he becomes like before he becomes the Messiah, which is also an interesting way. I'm kind of rambling here, but Jesus is feels more human, and he later becomes the Messiah. It feels like God kind of takes control of Jesus rather than Jesus being God and being fully divine. Having those two natures, or whatever you believe, whatever denomination you believe in, he feels more. He feels way more human, and that God is merely just speaking through him, which I guess would align more with the messianic view of Jesus rather than as like the Jewish messianic view of Jesus, rather than Jesus being God coming down to sacrifice himself for us, which Kazantzakis constantly plays with throughout in this book. He makes Jesus feel divine at times where he calls him the Son of God, and then there are times where he feels fully human. And I think Kazantzakis' removal almost completely of the Virgin Mary from this novel kind of plays into that. We're not really given a definitive answer if Jesus is born of a virgin birth. The three wise men do show up after his birth, but when you're reading it, it doesn't really feel like Jesus is divine, if that makes sense. Like if when you read the Gospels, you understand that Jesus is God and that he can do these amazing things. And Kazantzakis kind of plays on that by making him less divine. And I think a good example of that in this story would be Kazantzakis's interpretation of the resurrection of Lazarus. So when he does resurrect Lazarus, he almost it feels even worse had he just stayed dead. He feels like a zombie when you're reading. You feel really bad for him, especially since Mary and blanking on the other sister's name of Lazarus in the story. They both have to just care for him now, and he can't do any work, and he feels like a ghoul, like he's like wrapped up in bandages, and he smells bad. Like it almost is a shame that even Jesus resurrected him in the first place. Uh, I thought that was interesting. I I wasn't a fan of that, honestly. I think Jesus feels like a lesser God than God himself. Doesn't feel like a part of the Trinity. Feels more so like a prophet, like Moses or Isaiah would have been, which I didn't appreciate, but I did like this book. I'm not gonna lie, I enjoyed it. I thought Kazantzakis's worldview was clearly seen. I think he was a very complex man from what I know. I've took a very cursory understanding of Kazantzakis, but I do know that he was exiled, or he had a self-imposed exile. I don't know if I said that already. I hope I didn't. But overall, there were really good parts. I did like certain prose. Other than that, it felt pretty plain. Maybe that's just my translation. Even though the translator did say that he worked closely with Kazantzakis' wife at the time when translating, but maybe that's just how he writes. I do want to read more from him. I know Zorba the Greek is a very well-known, well-renowned novel by him, but this is my first introduction to him. I probably should have picked a better one, but I did enjoy this despite the flaws and the different thinkings on the way of Jesus in his life. Speaking of that, though, I think the most interesting part of this whole book was Jesus' relationship with Judas. How it starts with Jesus in the monastery and Judas tracking him down to kill him, and then eventually joining him, despite Jesus being, this frail, ragged man, and Judas constantly being portrayed as this brawling, huge, massive man with this giant red beard, which, funnily enough, I didn't actually know that he was depicted as that. I always just thought that Judas, from other like depictions of Judas, that he was just like this random like old guy, rather than what he was, I guess, depicted more so in the Bible as like someone with red hair. I thought that was interesting. When I first read it, I was like, huh, that's wrong. And then I did further research and I realized that, oh, no, 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 it is pretty close to the Bible. So I think it's interesting what Kazantzakis chose from the Gospels and what he chose to omit and add himself, like the relationship between Mary Magdalene and Jesus and Jesus' close relationship with Judas. I thought those were both interesting. The first sermon that Jesus gave, I think that was God trying to that was God fully imposing his will onto Jesus rather than Jesus speaking as God, which um, I personally believe is the true definition, not what Kazantzakis is writing. But I can still appreciate an artist's rendition of this classic story. And yeah, those are my thoughts. I'm sure I have more to say, and I'm gonna ruminate on this more. I just finished this today, actually, on my lunch break at work, but I did enjoy it, and yeah, thanks for listening to me ramble for 7 minutes.